Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how I do floral greeting cards. Before I get started explaining all of this, I need to ask you to please ignore the state of my hands. I've been experimenting with different pigments and different mediums, and my hands have gotten a little bit stained, especially around the nail area. Unfortunately, I've developed an allergy to many different brands of gloves, which means that when I'm doing anything creative, I can't have that extra layer of protection. If you know of a brand of special gloves for people that have lots of allergies, I'd love it if you could let me know, or if you've got any alternative ideas, that would be fantastic as well. So let's get started. Normally when I'm doing transparent florals, I tend to have my mixture a lot thinner, so more water, less pigment. I chose to do these flowers with more pigment and less water, but you'll see that I still would do the same techniques that you would normally do when it comes to transparent flowers. So you'll see that I put the mixture on, and then before it dries completely, I take a dry brush and pick up as much of that liquid as possible. So you'll see as I start to pick that liquid up, how it leaves that beautiful tone at the bottom. That's actually on the page, and you can see the difference in the shades as I take this dry brush and pick up that pigment in that water. When my hand moves off camera, all I'm doing is dabbing the brush onto some paper towel, which will help to get rid of that pigment so that I'm not using that, or transferring, should I say, that pigment onto the next petal. My design for this flower does not have overlapping petals at this stage. This means that I don't have to worry about these petals being 100% dry before I start on the next petals. The next two petals will make the total to 4, and it will be done at the top and the bottom, as you see that I'm going to do now, which means that it will look almost like a plus sign. I will follow the same steps as I did for the first two petals, namely laying down the paint and then picking it up, dabbing it off and showing that color underneath. When I normally do transparent flowers, I do it a lot differently to the way I'm doing these ones. As I've already stated, I will use a lot more water and a lot less pigment. When I do transparent flowers in that manner, the problem that I have is that I don't have a distinct outline. This means that I need to take a very fine brush and go around the border once that paint has dried. What I like about this technique, which is more water but also more pigment, is that when you lift it, it leaves a beautiful shade underneath, but it also tends to leave a lovely border around the edges as well. You will notice that the first of these two petals that I did, I painted and then I moved on to the second petal. What this means is that the paint has a couple seconds to sit and dry around the edges, so that when I pick that paint up and dab it, it has its own border. So it's kind of like killing two birds with one stone. The downside of this method is that you tend to go through a lot more of your paint. If you're using cheaper paints, then this obviously isn't much of a problem. But if you're using professional series, you don't always want to waste all that paint. Professional series paint can get really pricey. And now let these 4 petals dry completely before adding the next lot. Replicating the same petal shape, I now make sure that I overlap just the sides of each flower to the left and right of the petal that I'm doing. I then follow the same technique, painting, lifting slightly, and then letting dry. I'll do these for the remaining petals of this flower. Once the flower is completely dry, I will then work on the center. Using a clean brush, I dab clean water around the center. Then using a wet on wet technique, I'll pick up some of the paint, the pigment, and dab it on that water that I've already laid down. I keep on adding the pigment until I'm getting a center that I like. Sometimes I'll need to remove, or should I say lift, the pigment, and sometimes I'll wait for it to dry a little bit more before I do any further details. There is no right and wrong, just do what feels good and what makes you happy. once everything looks exactly the way you want it or the way you love it, then set it aside and let it dry completely. Once dry, I start putting in all the finer details. Here you can do whatever you love the most, but I prefer to use a very fine brush and do lots of tiny, very fine lines. I love the length of the bristles on this brush, and I'm actually quite surprised every time I use it by actually how much paint it can hold. I can either use the tip or I can lay it down and use the whole length of the bristles. This is one of my favorite brushes, and I tend to use it for the majority of my details whenever I'm painting flowers. The rest of this video is just me adding the finer details to this flower. I'll let you watch it in peace without hearing me rambling on. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you found some value in this video. Enjoy further.